Hello, and welcome to the Consciousness Café, Wisdom Wednesdays with SoulCall Global. Reverend Christie Hardwick, I'm here with Brian Mcnaught this morning. So happy to be with my dear friend. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Christie, thank you for having me. This is great.
So happy to be here with you. Let me introduce Brian Mcnaught to you. First, as a dear friend and colleague, and someone who I greatly respect for all the work that you've done in the lesbian, gay, and bisexual, transgender, queer community to bring our strengths and beauty to light through your own risk and reward and the gifts that you bring. You've now authored 9 books, and I think this is the 9th is the most recent one, and it's your first children's book, I think. What's Gay? Asked May, and we're going to watch a little clip from that film that was made from the book, which you can get, and the film that you can also watch. But I'm going to share my screen and show just a little bit of this.
What's gay? What's gay?
Asked May of her cousin Ray.
It's a way to love.
Cooed the mourning dove.
A way to love. A way to love.
That makes sense.
Said Ray, whose uncle was gay.
Uncle Gary and Uncle Barry are going to marry, and I'm going to carry their rings that day. Your Uncle Barry and your Uncle Gary are gay?
Asked May.
I'd say,
Replied the blue jay.
Who else is gay?
Asked May.
Who else might love this way? I can't say,
Said Ray.
but the hummingbird may.
You're made that way.
They heard the hummingbird say.
And not just people like your Uncle Barry, but animals too, like whales and dogs and a moose named Larry.
That's wonderful. So it gives you a feel for that beautiful book and story, and then an animation that came, as you mentioned to me before we started, that it happened. Someone asked if they could do it, and you said,
Sure, yes.
Yes.
Say yes. Say yes to the universe when it invites you.
absolutely. And when we were on the break working on my technology, making sure we got the video up, you mentioned that it wasn't 9. This isn't the 9th book. This is actually maybe your 12th. Is that right?
Yeah, my 12th is going to be coming out soon, called
Oh, okay.
On Being Gay and Gray.
There we go. So
Yeah.
you've taken it in so many different directions, and I love this. I was looking at some of the biographies of you, of people who just write about you, and they said, named the godfather of gay diversity training by the New York Times. And
Yeah.
that's so beautiful because you've been at this for a really long time. But there was a beginning, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the person who has had this complete arch of, being in diversity around LGBTQ issues for decades, and then writing a children's book and then writing about aging. So this has really been your lifelong calling. How did it start?
Yeah, Christie, 47 years of doing this work, and I feel so grateful. It started when I got fired for being gay by the Catholic Church in 1974. I was a conscientious objector to the war in Vietnam. When I graduated from college, that was the first year of the draft. So I did my alternative service at a Catholic newspaper in Detroit, and when I started the Detroit chapter of Dignity, a gay Catholic group, they initially dropped my column, and then they fired me after I went on a hunger fast to protest the sins of the church. I was 26. And so after I was fired, I thought, okay, now, so what do you do now? Well, all these requests started coming in, like, well, you wrote a column for the Catholic Church. Why don't you write a column for the gay press? Okay. Well, would you come and speak to us about being gay in our women's studies class? Sure. And it just, one led to the other, and then, after I started speaking on college campuses, a mutual friend of yours and mine, Ron Robin at the Muse, who at the time was a disc jockey in Boston, said, let's make a video of your talks. So I said, okay, yes. And so they did, and it was one of the first videos ever made on what it means to be gay. And it played on television stations and was used in classrooms. And that led to a couple other videos and books. People
Wow.
said, well, let's put your columns together and make a book. Okay. So it's
Beautiful. And then when was this? When was this auspicious
well,
beginning?
I started in 1974 in Detroit. I was 26, and people who have written the history, the gay history of Detroit, say that some of the early activists said, Brian Mcnaught came out of nowhere. And it's true, I was this middle child of 7 Irish Catholics, 16 years of Catholic education. My dad was head of the GM Public Relations Department. We were sort of this, button down, blue blazer.
So it sounds like you didn't have a plan to become this activist. It sounds like
Absolutely not.
you were
No.
in training. And then tell me again the name of the organization that you started, Dignity?
Dignity, and I just started the Detroit chapter of it. It's
Detroit chapter.
Yeah. But Christie, I think is true. I know is true for you. Ever since I was little, I've asked to be of service. I've asked, God, use me. Here I am. Show me the way. And so I really believe that if you ask to be of service, that it's going to get answered, and you're going to get opportunities to do it. And so once it, somebody interviewed me recently, and they said, well, when this reporter from the Detroit News called you and said, can they interview you on religion and homosexuality? You could have said no, and no one would have known. You still would have had your job, and you would have had dignity. Why'd you say yes? Because it ended up you losing your job after you said yes. I couldn't say no. How would, if I said no, then no one would have known about dignity. And the fact that every Sunday we were having mass, and you could come and as a gay person, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, and join hands and feel at home. Mm-hmm. And so of course I had to say yes.
Yes.
And saying yes meant, big story in the paper, and then my getting my column dropped. The reporter called me and she said, has there been any reaction to my article about you? And I said, yeah, they just dropped my column. Well, let me get a pencil. And then, next day, Catholic newspaper drops column by homosexual. And, what's interesting, Christie, and I've been talking and writing about this a lot. I became, at that moment, I became a homosexual. Brian Mcnaught, the son of Waldo and Virginia, my life changed. I was the first recipient of a Christian Leadership Award in my all boys Catholic high school. And when the story came out about me, my name was taken off the plaque. Wow. There was a battle among the faculty, and eventually it was put back up. But the first time I was invited to speak, I went to a house, and the lady greeted me at the door. It was a Bible study group. And she said, the lady in the green blazer says she's going to throw up when you walk in the room. I thought, throw up? I'm Brian, they elected me class president. I was yearbook editor. Girls love to dance. How can you throw up with me?
Yes. Let's talk a little bit about that sort of innocence in the way that you approach this, because it was really following the calling of just telling the truth.
Yes.
And you told the truth, and there were consequences, for telling the truth. You didn't necessarily say, I am going to be the poster child for, gay men.
No.
Going forward. And so you suddenly became almost professionally gay without it being your choice. And it became the focus of your identity, even if you hadn't said, I'm going to make this the focus of my identity. But you accepted that because you kept saying yes to telling the truth in different forms.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And at the time, and this was only 5 years after Stonewall, for some people, I was the right face, the right person at the right time, because I wasn't scary. I loved my family. I believed in love. I wanted a partnership, with another person. And a lot of people who struggled with, I don't want to be gay because if I'm gay, then it's going to mean that I have no morals, and I'm going to be, I'm going to molest. All the awful things that they said about us in books and in movies and TV shows. So I put myself out there, and this is who I am. I don't know who you are, but this is me. And really the success of my, I ended up speaking in Mumbai and Tokyo and Singapore,
Mhm,
Hong
mhm.
Kong as the guest of corporations.
And this
All
is
I
a
did,
conversation, yeah, from
all I
the
did was
70s. Yeah.
all I did was tell my story.
Yes. Yes.
I put a face on the issue that allowed people to say, huh, I got to rethink this because he's
Mhm.
not so scary. Um,
Yes, and that's decades ago. And I'm thinking about a conversation I just had a week or so ago on Black sexuality and spirituality and the church, and still the spiritual centers and churches still struggle with inclusivity around sexuality, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. And your beginning so long ago has made such an impact in so many places, and yet there's still the work to do, and you have stayed in it. So it was interesting
yeah,
that you didn't sign up to be the activist, but it happened. And then I recall meeting you somewhere at, I call, the award-winning time of your career, where you were getting the accolades for the first couple of decades of all the
right.
work that you had done and the historic impact that you've had on the movement. And one of the things I remember about you, from the standpoint of your leadership and the way that you are, is a lot of us would always use the acronyms LGBT, LGBTQ, LGBTI, whatever. And you were really clear about saying, we need to name this.
Hmm.
These initials let people off the hook. It
Yep.
makes it like it's some kind of a condition rather than we're talking about actual people. And you would always
Yeah.
have to say into a room, we're talking about lesbians. Lesbians? We're talking about queer people. We're talking about gay people. We're talking about transgender, people who actually identify as this. And I want to say the word in order to
Yeah.
bring them into the room. That was really important to you to name it.
Yes. And a great story about that, if I might. I spoke to the National Security Agency, and I only agreed to do it if they mandated it because I didn't want just people there who, were supportive. And so it was a packed audience. And one of the things I asked them to do was to go home that night and ask their kids and their spouse, how was your day? And then say, well, today I heard a presentation on, and use the words lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender issues, because it may be the first time your children have ever heard you say the word lesbian or gay. And this senior person at the NSA wrote me the next day and he said, Brian, you've changed my life. He said, I went home, I did what you suggested we do. And my daughter walked into the bedroom and said, Dad, we have to talk. I'm a lesbian. And he said, I said what you told us to say, because I say to an audience, so what do you say when someone tells you? You say, thank you, because you've picked me out of all the people you could have picked out to tell this big secret. You've picked me. So I said, thank you, honey, for telling me. And she started crying and I started crying and we hugged. He said, we have a relationship we never would have had if I hadn't used the word, if I hadn't said lesbian at my own family's,
Yes.
dinner table.
Beautiful. And it
Yeah,
presenced her. And so she was able to speak into that presence. And that's the gift that you've
absolutely.
been giving for decades. And there's another way that there's a sort of a coming out, and it's about spirituality. And it's similar. It's like talking about that I actually believe in something greater than myself, that I have a connection to what I call spirit. And you have been really out about that as well. And I think the lesson or the information or the wisdom for people listening today is about saying yes, telling your truth, and saying the words. If it's God, if it's Allah, if it's Buddha, if it's spirit, if it's universe, if it's love that you believe in or you believe has some value, then you say it, you speak it.
Yes.
And you've been
Yes.
doing that as well recently, in addition to so much more work in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community.
God, I believe, I really do believe that God is love, but I believe love is service. Love is an action verb. And and God, love, universe has been a part of my life my whole life, ever since I was little. And I'd be in church praying and I could feel this tingle up and down my back. I've always had this special relationship with my higher power, and it's never left me. Sometimes I would get angry and think, how could you let Jerry Falwell and all these horrible people use your name in such horrible ways? But it's my sense of belonging to something bigger than my ego, has always been with me. And I think that's the biggest challenge we all face, is don't let your ego get in the way. because, love is waiting to use you, and you are love,
Yes.
manifest it.
Beautiful. Love is waiting to use you, and you have allowed love to use you your entire life, your adult life. I mean, like you said, starting at 26, and before that, you were in service in different kinds of ways. And then when the
Yeah.
calling came to be in service as your whole self and being out there, out and proud, and not only pride in the sense that we know today, but really more of I am an authentic, full, and whole human being, so I'm going to show up in the room and talk to you. And I love that, again, that innocence and that kind of incredulous feeling of, why wouldn't you want to know me? Right?
Right.
You
And
give the
guess
gift to everyone
yeah,
out there, whatever it is that is part of your identity, that you think there might be a different reaction to having that attitude of, why wouldn't you want to know me? I'm love, in action. I'm love
I'm a I'm
expressed.
a good guy. I'm a good guy. I'm a manifestation of God. Why wouldn't you want to have a conversation with me? Why wouldn't you want to be my friend? I mean, why not be God's friend?
Yes. Yes. And you have continued to write about it and express yourself. And I think it's a beautiful invitation, the kind of example of your life to keep saying yes, to keep expressing, to tell your stories. And, check out Brian Mcnaught and the 11 books that are out there right now. I'm
Yeah.
waiting for that 12th book because there are so many. I can just think of one of them I think it's Our YouTube Brothers is one of the ones you wrote about, just being in a couple that's of the same gender and what that brings. And you've written about sexuality in very open and affirming and beautiful ways. And your voice is so important to the dialogue of love and loving each other and loving ourselves exactly as we are and presenting ourselves to the world as an opportunity for learning and healing and connection. So I'm so grateful for everything that you've done with your life.
Oh, thanks, Christy. And I,
Being in the world.
back at you. I mean, I'm one of the things that feeds me is friendships with incredible souls like yourself. So many of us ended up leaving our institutional churches because we didn't give up on them, but they didn't nurture us. And so we had to find places that nurtured us. And, that's when we ran into the Christie Hardwicks of the world. And there are so many people out there. No one really knows this, but there's so many of us that are on a spiritual path who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. And it's really exciting because we have great gifts to offer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot to offer, and so does everyone else who is out there. So if you're listening to this, just be infused with the love of this light of this amazing and wonderful being, and know that you are completely loved.
Yes. Yeah.
Brian Mcnaught.
Thank you, Christy Hardwick.